The morning sun painted the fields of New Eden in golden light. Sister Minji walked through the gardens of St. Helena Orphanage, watching the children play. 347 children called this place home. They came from all corners of human space, orphaned by wars, accidents, and tragedy. Here they found peace. Sister Minji called 8-year-old Hana, running between the apple trees. "Look what I found!" She held up a small blue flower, her eyes bright with wonder. "Beautiful, dear one." Minji smiled, kneeling down to examine the flower. Around them, other children played games, tended the small garden plots, and helped with morning chores. The older ones looked after the younger ones. It was like a large family. Far above in space, Captain Hyun sat in his command chair aboard the patrol ship Harmony. The ship moved slowly through the outer system, conducting routine patrols. Hyun had been doing this job for 10 years. Most days were quiet. Today felt no different. "Captain," called his communications officer, Lieutenant Nari. "We're getting a distress signal from New Eden Colony." Hyun frowned. New Eden was one of the peaceful farming worlds. They rarely had problems. "What kind of distress?" "Unknown ships in the system, sir. Colony administrator says they're not responding." To Hales. "Set course for New Eden. Best possible speed." The Harmony turned toward the inner system. Hyun felt a cold worry in his stomach. Unknown ships usually meant trouble. On New Eden, Dr. Jiwon finished her morning rounds at the Colony Medical Center. Through her window, she could see the orphanage in the distance. The children were probably having their breakfast now. "Sister." Minji always made sure they ate well. The warning sirens started screaming. Jiwon ran outside. Above them, 3 large ships hung in the sky like dark metal clouds. She had never seen ships like these before. They were long and sharp, covered in weapons. The ships belonged to the Vecturi Confederation. "All civilians to emergency shelters," the colony administrator announced over the speakers. "This is not a drill. Repeat, all civilians to emergency shelters immediately." At the orphanage, Sister Minji gathered the children quickly. The older ones helped carry the babies. 347 children moved as fast as they could toward the underground shelter. "Don't be afraid," Minji told them as they walked. "We've practiced this many times. Everyone knows what to do." Young Hana still clutched her blue flower. "Sister, why are the ships so scary looking?" "Some people make their ships to look frightening," Minji explained. "But we are safe. The shelter is very strong." Above them, the Vectari ships moved into position. War leader Korath stood on the bridge of his flagship. He looked down at the human colony with cold eyes. "Sir," said his weapons officer, "we have confirmed the military targets. The defense platforms are minimal. This will be over quickly." "No," Korath said slowly. "These humans need to learn a lesson. They think they can expand into our territory without consequences." "What are your orders, sir?" Korath pointed at his screen. It showed the orphanage building clearly. "There, that large building with all the small humans. Target it first." The weapons officer hesitated. "Sir, that appears to be a facility for their young non-combatants." "Exactly," Korath smiled. "When you want to break a species, you target what they care about most. Humans are soft. They care too much about their offspring. This will teach them." In space, Captain Hyun pushed his ship's engines to their limits. The Harmony raced toward New Eden, but they were still hours away. "Sir, we're detecting weapons fire," reported Nari. "Multiple plasma bombardments. Can you raise the colony?" "Trying, sir. The interference is heavy." At St. Helena Orphanage, the children had almost reached the shelter. Sister Minji looked up at the sky. One of the alien ships was turning toward them. Its weapons were glowing with deadly light. "Run!" she shouted. "Everyone run!" The first plasma bolt hit the main building. The explosion was enormous. The second bolt hit the dormitories. The third hit the playground. The Vectari ship circled around, firing again and again. They wanted to make sure nothing survived. Sister Minji threw herself over 3 small children as the world exploded around them. The heat was incredible. The sound was like thunder that never ended. When the firing stopped, St. Helena Orphanage was gone. In its place was a crater of melted stone and burning earth. Captain Hune arrived 4 hours later. His ship dropped from hyperspace to find the colony in ruins. Emergency teams were already working, but the damage was terrible. "Captain, you need to see this," called Sergeant Donghyun from the surface. Hyun took a shuttle down to the planet. What he saw made him sick. The orphanage was completely destroyed. Dr. Jiwon stood at the edge of the crater, tears streaming down her face. Rescue workers searched through the rubble, but everyone knew the truth. No one could have survived this. "How many?" Hyun asked quietly. 347 children, Jiwon whispered. And Sister Minji. They were all trying to reach the shelter when she couldn't finish. Sergeant Donghyun approached with a small object in his hands. It was a burned teddy bear, barely recognizable. "Sir, we've found personal items scattered across 3 kilometers. The blast was designed to spread debris as far as possible." "Designed?" "Yes, sir. This wasn't random bombing. Someone planned this specifically to cause maximum, to make sure everyone saw what happened." Lieutenant Nari had been analyzing the wreckage with her equipment. "Captain, I've recovered some security footage. You need to see this." They gathered around her portable screen. The footage showed the Vectari ships approaching. It showed them deliberately targeting the orphanage building. It showed them circling back 3 times to make sure their work was complete. "They knew what they were hitting," Hyun said, his voice deadly quiet. "They specifically targeted children." The news spread across human space like wildfire. Every communication channel carried the images: burned toys, small shoes scattered in the dirt. The crater where innocent children had played just hours before. On Earth, Admiral Junho sat in his office aboard the flagship Indomitable. He had seen combat for 30 years. He had watched friends die in battle. But as he looked at the reports, from New Eden his hands shook. "Sir?" asked his aide, Commander Soo-young. "Get me President Minnie immediately," Junho said, "and call an emergency meeting of all fleet commanders." "Sir? What should I tell them the meeting is about?" Junho looked at the images on his screen one more time. A small blue flower, somehow unburned, lay in the ashes. "Tell them we're discussing a change in human military doctrine." The Galactic Council chambers on Centaurus Prime buzzed with activity. Representatives from dozens of species gathered to discuss the incident at New Eden. The Vectari ambassador, Thexkar, stood at the central podium. "The Vectari Confederation regrets any civilian casualties," he announced to the assembly. "However, the humans have been expanding aggressively into disputed territory. Some collateral damage was inevitable." "Collateral damage?" The human ambassador, Shan Wu, rose from his seat. His voice was ice cold. "You deliberately targeted an orphanage. Your species should better protect your spawn if you consider them valuable," Thexkar replied dismissively. "Perhaps this will teach humans to respect boundaries." The chamber fell silent. Every species present understood what had just happened. The Vectari had not just attacked human children, they had mocked their deaths. Ambassador Chanwu activated his communication device. "Mr. President, I believe diplomacy has failed." Back on New Eden, the rescue efforts continued. Dr. Jiwon worked alongside volunteers from across the colony. They found fragments of toys, pieces of clothing, but no survivors. The Vectari had been thorough. "Doctor," called one of the searchers, "we found something." They had uncovered a piece of wall from the orphanage. On it, barely visible, were handprints, painted by the children. Small hands in bright colors with names written underneath. Hana, Jinwoo, Sul, Minho. 347 names. Captain Hyun stood looking at the memorial wall that evening. Around him, the colony held a vigil. Thousands of candles flickered in the darkness. People cried. Others stood in angry silence. "Sir," Sergeant Donghyun approached quietly, "we've received new orders from Fleet Command." "What are they?" "We're to return to Earth immediately. All ships are being recalled." "For what?" Donghyun hesitated. The message just said War Council, Priority Alpha. I've never seen that classification before, sir. Across human space, similar messages were being sent. On mining stations and research facilities, on colony worlds and trade ships, humans received the news. The children of New Eden were dead. The Vectari had laughed about it. Something was changing in humanity. It was quiet at first, like a distant storm. On 100 worlds, humans looked up at the stars and felt something they had not felt for generations. Pure, burning rage. In the Vectari territories, war leader Korath celebrated his victory. His subordinates praised his tactical brilliance. The humans would surely withdraw now, afraid for their other colonies. Sir, his intelligence officer reported, we're detecting unusual activity in human space. Ship movements, communication bursts. They're probably evacuating their frontier colonies. Korath laughed. I told you humans are weak. Attack their offspring and they collapse. But the intelligence officer looked worried. Sir, the movements don't look like evacuations, they look like mobilization. On Ea, Admiral Junho stood in the war room aboard Earth's orbital command station. Holographic displays showed military movements across all of human space. What he saw amazed and terrified him. Every human colony, every mining station, every research outpost was volunteering everything they had. Ships, resources, people, all offered freely for what everyone now called the Reckoning. Sir, reported Commander Su-Yung, New Kyoto has volunteered their entire merchant fleet. That's 400 ships. And New California? They're converting all their factories to produce military equipment. Mars Industrial says they can triple weapons production in 2 weeks. Director Seung-hoon of the Colonial Administration watched the reports flow in. In 30 years of government service, he had never seen anything like this. Humanity was mobilizing not because they were ordered to, but because they wanted to. Director, his aide said, we have a problem. Too many volunteers. Too many? Sir, we have 12 million people trying to enlist. Our training facilities can only handle 500,000 at a time. On Europa, General Taiyang put on his uniform for the first time in 10 years. The medals felt heavy on his chest. Each one represented a battle, a victory, lives saved and lost. But none of those wars had felt like this. General, his aide knocked. On the door. Transport is ready. Admiral Junho is waiting for you on the flagship. Taeyang looked at himself in the mirror. 70 years old, gray hair, lined face. But his eyes were the same steel gray they had been during the Centauri campaign. Tell the Admiral I'll be there shortly. And send a message to all retired military personnel. Any who wish to serve again should report to their nearest recruitment center. Within 6 hours, the message had spread across human space. The response was overwhelming. 2 million veterans, from young men barely out of their 20s to old soldiers in their 80s, requested return to active duty. President Minai met with her cabinet in the secure conference room beneath Geneva. The faces around the table were grim. Madam President, said Defense Secretary Kyung-ho, we need to discuss our objectives. What exactly are we trying to accomplish? The Vectari killed our children, Minhee replied simply. We're going to make sure they never do it again. Are we talking about a police action? Limited response. The president was quiet for a long moment. Secretary, show them the New Eden footage again. The hologram displayed the security camera. Recordings. The Vectari ships approaching. The deliberate targeting of the orphanage. The multiple attack runs to ensure no survivors. Now show them the Galactic Council footage. Ambassador Thexkar appeared, smiling as he dismissed the deaths as collateral damage, and suggesting humans better protect their spawn. Any species that deliberately murders children and then mocks their deaths has declared war on human civilization itself, the president said quietly. This isn't about territory or trade disputes. This is about survival, our children's survival. What are you proposing? Total war. Complete elimination of the Vectari military capacity. They wanted to teach us about boundaries. We're going to teach them why those boundaries exist. Dr. Subin worked in her laboratory deep beneath the military research facility on Luna. Around her, Teams of scientists activated projects that had been theoretical for decades. Project Prometheus had been sealed away, deemed too dangerous for normal warfare. "Doctor," called Engineer Jamin, "the nanite production line is online. We can have the first batch ready in 72 hours. Good. What about the gravity weapons? Still theoretical, but we've had a breakthrough. If we can get close enough to their ships, we'll get close enough," Dr. Subin said grimly. "Trust me on that. These weren't weapons designed to defeat enemies. They were weapons designed to erase them. Nanites that could break down enemy technology at the molecular level. Gravity bombs that could collapse entire star systems. Psychological warfare tools that could drive entire species to madness. For 50 years, humans had kept these weapons, locked away. Now the locks were coming off. Captain Yerim prepared for the most dangerous mission of her career. Intelligence gathering in Vektari space was normally impossible. Their security was too good, their territory too well guarded. But Captain Yerim was no ordinary intelligence officer. She had volunteered for experimental modifications that allowed her to pass for other species. Today, she would become a Krellian trader, one of the mercant races that did business throughout Vektari space. "Captain," her handler briefed her, "your mission is simple. Get close to Vektari military leadership. Find out their plans, their capabilities, their weaknesses." "What's my cover story?" "You're selling rare metals from the Outer Rim. Krellians are greedy enough that the Vektari won't question your presence." "And if I'm discovered?" The handler was quiet. They both knew the answer. If she was discovered, she would die slowly. But she also knew something else. 347 children were already dead. Her risk seemed small by comparison. In the Vektari home system, war leader Korath met with his advisors. Reports from the border were becoming concerning. "Sir," his intelligence chief reported, "human activity has increased dramatically. We're detecting massive ship movements." "How massive?" "Conservative estimates suggest they're mobilizing at least 2,000 vessels. Possibly more." Korath laughed. But it sounded forced. "Impossible. Humans don't have that many military ships. Sir, they appear to be converting civilian vessels, cargo ships, passenger liners, research vessels. Everything is being armed. That's desperation. Civilian ships can't fight proper warships." His fleet commander, General Drex, looked worried. "Sir, our spies report something else. Human veterans are coming out of retirement, millions of them. Old soldiers can't change the balance of power." "Sir, these aren't just any veterans. Some fought in the Centauri campaign. They have experience in total warfare." Korath waved dismissively. "One old general doesn't matter." "Sir, it's not one general. Intelligence reports that General Taeyang himself has returned to active duty." For the first time, Korath felt real fear. Every military officer in the galaxy knew that name. Taeyang had never lost a battle. More importantly, he had never shown mercy to enemies who threatened civilians. "Double our border patrols," Korath ordered. "And send a message to the Galactic Council. Tell them we're willing to negotiate." Ambassador Chanwu received the Vektari message while sitting in his office on Centaurus Prime. He read it twice, then forwarded it to Earth without comment. President Minnie's response came back within an hour. Negotiations ended when they laughed about dead children. Inform the Galactic Council that any species attempting to interfere with human military operations will be considered hostile. The message was clear. Humanity was done talking. On the shipyards orbiting Mars, workers labored around the clock. Chief Engineer Sang-hoon supervised the conversion of civilian vessels into warships. A luxury cruise liner became a troop transport. A cargo hauler became a missile platform. A research vessel became a stealth bomber. "How many ships will we have ready?" asked Admiral Junho during his inspection. 3,000 confirmed, sir. Possibly 4,000 if the outer colonies finish their conversions on schedule. Quality? They won't win any beauty contests, but they'll fight. And sir, the crews volunteering for these ships, then they're not doing it for pay or glory. They all saw the footage from New Eden. Junho nodded. Motivated troops were more dangerous than well-equipped ones. Motivated troops seeking vengeance were the most dangerous force in the galaxy. Captain Yareem arrived in Vectari space aboard a stolen merchant ship. Her forged identification passed initial inspection. She was cleared to dock at Vectar Prime, the capital world. The planet was heavily fortified. Orbital defense platforms surrounded it like a metal moon. Military ships patrolled constantly. Getting accurate intelligence would be difficult. But as she walked through the capital city's markets, she overheard conversations that chilled her. Vectari civilians were celebrating the attack on New Eden. They saw it as a great victory against human expansion. "Did you see the footage?" one merchant asked another. "The way their spawn scattered when our ships arrived?" "Korath is a genius," the other replied. "Attack their young and they'll surrender everything." Yareem recorded everything. These conversations would be broadcast across human space soon. Every human would hear how the Vectari celebrated the murder of children. In his private office, war leader Korath met with a special visitor, Ambassador Zextai from the Hegemony, one of the galaxy's most powerful alliances. "The Hegemony is concerned about human military buildup," Zextai said. "Perhaps we could offer mediation services." "I would welcome that," Korath replied. "The humans are clearly overreacting to a minor border incident." "Minor incident?" "Some civilian casualties were unavoidable. War is war." Zextai made notes on his data pad. What he didn't tell Korath was that the Hegemony had already decided to remain neutral. Species that celebrated killing children were not worth defending. General Taeyang arrived on Earth's command station to find controlled chaos. Officers ran between stations coordinating the largest military buildup in human history. "General," Admiral Junho greeted him. "Welcome back." "Admiral, show me what we're dealing with." They gathered around the main tactical display. It showed human forces massing at staging areas throughout the outer. At exactly 0000 hours, Galactic Standard Time, humanity showed the galaxy what absolute war looked like. The first strike wasn't an invasion, it was systematic annihilation. Admiral Junho stood on the bridge of the flagship Vengeance, watching, as 4,000 human ships dropped out of hyperspace across 17 Vectari systems simultaneously. This wasn't a battle plan, it was an execution. "All fleets report successful insertion," Commander Suyung announced. "No enemy resistance detected." "Because they never expected this," General Taeyang said quietly. "They thought we'd attack. One system at a time like civilized warfare. They were wrong." In the Theta sector, Captain Minje commanded the stealth ship Silent Fury. For weeks she had been positioning gravity mines throughout Vectari space. The mines were invisible, undetectable, and absolutely deadly. Now it was time to activate them. "Navigation mines are in position," her weapons officer reported. 37 major hyperspace routes are covered. "Detonate them," Minje ordered. Across Vectari space, the mines exploded. But these weren't normal explosions. They were gravity bombs that twisted space-time itself. Hyperspace routes collapsed. Star systems became isolated. The Vectari fleet, spread across their territory, could no longer coordinate or retreat. "Sir," a Vectari communications officer shouted to war leader Korath. "We've lost contact with the outer fleets. Something's blocking hyperspace travel." Korath stared at his tactical display in disbelief. Red warning markers appeared across the entire map. "How is this possible?" "Unknown, sir. It's like the humans have cut our territory into separate pieces." But the humans weren't finished. Phase 2 began immediately. Commander Suyung led the second wave of attacks. Her target wasn't enemy ships. It was infrastructure. Human forces struck supply depots, communication centers, shipyards, and command bases with surgical precision. "Target the military academy on Vectar 7, she ordered. "Disable it, don't destroy it. We want prisoners who can give us information." The attack was flawless. Within minutes, the most advanced military training facility in Vectari space was under human control. The instructors and senior students were captured alive. Soon they would be answering questions about Vectari military capabilities. Major Dongwan led marine assault teams against the fortress world of Karthek. The planet was supposedly impregnable, protected by massive shield generators and orbital defense platforms. The humans didn't attack the shields. They went around them. Marines were using the sewage tunnels, Dongwon announced over the comm system. I know it's disgusting, but the Vectari never thought anyone would be crazy enough to crawl through alien waste systems. 6 hours later, Karthek's impregnable fortress was flying human flags. The shield generators had been destroyed from inside. The orbital platforms were scrap metal. The garrison had surrendered without firing a shot. How? The Vectari commander asked as he was led away in chains. You protected your fortress from attack from above and around, Dongwon explained. You forgot to protect it from below. Basic mistake. But humanity's most devastating weapon wasn't military. It was technological. Engineer Heian released the nanite swarms. The nanites were microscopic robots programmed with one simple task: find Vectari military technology and break it down molecule by molecule. They were invisible, unstoppable, and absolutely ruthless. Vectari warships began falling apart in space. Weapon systems simply dissolved. Armor plating turned to dust. Computer systems collapsed as their circuits were eaten away. Sir, a Vectari engineer screamed to his captain, the ship is dissolving. The hull plates are turning to powder. How do we stop it? I don't know. I've never seen anything like this. Across Vectari space, their technological superiority vanished. Ships that had been advanced marvels of engineering became floating scrap. The Vectari military discovered that their weapons, their shields, their computers, everything they depended on, could be destroyed by enemies they couldn't even see. War leader Korath watched his empire crumble in real time. Sir, his intelligence chief reported, we've lost 60% of our fleet. Not destroyed, dissolved. The ships are just coming apart. What about our ground forces? Their weapons are failing too. Rifles that worked yesterday are now piles of metal dust. How is this possible? The humans appear to have some kind of technology that breaks down our equipment at the atomic level. For the first time in his career, Korath felt true fear. This wasn't warfare as he understood it. This was something new and terrible. On Earth, President Minnie watched the reports with grim satisfaction. Casualty reports? She asked Defense Secretary Kyung-ho. Minimal on our side. 17 wounded, no deaths. The Vectari are reporting massive equipment failures but relatively few casualties. Good. We're not trying to commit genocide. We're removing their ability to wage war. The president's strategy was working perfectly. Previous wars had been about defeating enemy armies. This war was about making enemy armies impossible. General Taeyang coordinated the third phase of the assault. While the Vectari struggled with equipment failures, human forces moved to capture key strategic positions. We want their government leaders alive, he instructed his commanders. We want their military commanders alive. We want their scientists and engineers alive. But we want their weapons and ships eliminated completely. It was a new kind of warfare. Instead of destroying the enemy, humans were surgically removing their capacity to fight, while preserving the people themselves. The message was clear. We're not monsters, but we will not tolerate threats to our children. Captain Yarim, back from her intelligence mission, coordinated psychological warfare operations. The footage she had gathered of Vectari civilians celebrating the orphanage bombing was broadcast on every frequency. Let every species in the galaxy see this, she told her propaganda team. Let them see how the Vectari really feel about murdering children. The broadcasts had their intended effect. Across the galaxy, public opinion turned decisively against the Vectari. Species that might have offered support remained neutral. Some even quietly offered assistance to human forces. Commander, Bora led the assault on the Vectari shipyards at Keltar. These facilities had produced the ships that bombed New Eden. She had special orders regarding their fate. Don't just destroy them, General Taeyang had instructed. Make them impossible to rebuild. I want that system uninhabitable for military production for the next century. The attack was thorough. The shipyards weren't just destroyed, they were erased. Nanites consumed every piece of metal. Gravity bombs crushed the space stations into dust. When Bora's forces finished, there was nothing left but empty space. Sir, her engineering officer reported, The facilities are completely eliminated. We've also seeded the system with long-term nanites. Any attempt to rebuild military infrastructure here will fail. Good. One less place they can build ships to threaten our children. But the most devastating aspect of the human assault was its coordination. While Vektari forces struggled with equipment failures and isolated systems, human commanders shared information instantly across their entire theater of operations. Field Commander Wanho demonstrated this advantage during the battle for Vectar 4. His ground forces were outnumbered 3-1, but they had something the Vektari didn't: perfect intelligence. Enemy reinforcements approaching from the north, his scout reported. Estimated 300 vehicles. Nanite strike on their vehicle park authorized, came the immediate response from Orbital Command. ETA 15 minutes. Sir. His communications. Officer added, Fleet Command reports enemy air support has been neutralized. Their aircraft are dissolving. Wanho smiled grimly. Well, that makes this easy. All units advance to phase line Charlie. The enemy won't have working equipment by the time we get there. He was right. When his forces reached the Vektari positions, they found soldiers holding rifles that had crumbled to dust in their hands, tanks that had collapsed into piles of metal fragments, communications equipment that had simply vanished. The Vektari soldiers surrendered without resistance. What else could they do? War leader Korath made increasingly desperate attempts to rally his forces, but the situation was hopeless. Every system was isolated. Every ship was falling apart. Every weapon was failing. Sir, his aide reported, we're receiving surrender offers from 12 of our outer colonies. Surrender? We don't surrender. Sir, they don't have any choice. Their defense fleets have been dissolved. They have no way to fight back. Korath stared at his tactical display. The red zones representing human control were expanding rapidly. The green zones representing Vektari resistance were shrinking just as fast. How long before they reach the home system? At current rates of advance, 6 days. Sir, 6 days. The mighty Vektari Confederation, terror of 3 sectors, would be defeated in 6 days. But the humans weren't finished showing their capabilities. Dr. Subin activated humanity's most secret weapon, the consciousness disruptors. These devices didn't harm the body. They attacked the mind. Specifically, they made it impossible for Vektari military personnel to feel aggression or violence toward humans. The weapons were installed on captured Vektari ships and broadcast throughout their communication networks. Within hours, Vektari military personnel began laying down their arms. Not because they were ordered to, but because 3 months after the war began, the Vektari Confederation no longer existed. What remained was a collection of occupied worlds, their populations struggling to understand what had happened to their once mighty empire. War leader Korath sat in a human detention facility on Vektar Prime. Through his cell window he could see construction crews rebuilding the capital city. But these weren't Vektari workers. They were human engineers, working alongside Vektari civilians to restore infrastructure. They're treating our people better than we treated our own, his former aide, Captain Thrall, said from the next cell. Medical care, food distribution, education programs, I don't understand. Korath didn't understand either. In his military doctrine, defeated enemies were enslaved or eliminated. The humans were doing neither. They were simply removing all capacity for warfare while leaving everything else intact. Sir, Thrall continued, yesterday I watched human medics treating Vektari children. Children whose parents had celebrated the orphanage bombing. The humans didn't care. They just saw sick children who needed help. On Earth, Admiral Junho reviewed progress reports from the occupied territories. The numbers were remarkable. Vektari military capability? He asked Commander Suyong. 0, sir. Every ship dissolved. Every weapon destroyed. Every military installation either captured or eliminated. The nanite network ensures that any attempt to rebuild military assets fails immediately. Resistance movements? None detected. The psychological warfare systems are still active. Vektari civilians can't bring themselves to commit violence against human personnel. Civilian casualties? Remarkably low, sir. Fewer than 1,000 deaths across the entire campaign. most from accidents during equipment failures. Admiral Junho nodded with satisfaction. Humanity had achieved the impossible. Complete victory without genocide. But other species in the galaxy were beginning to worry. If humans could destroy the Vectari so completely, so quickly, what did that mean for everyone else? Ambassador Chanwu found himself fielding increasingly nervous inquiries from other species. "Ambassador," said the hegemony representative, "our governments are concerned about human military capabilities. The destruction of the Vectari was comprehensive. It was necessary," Chanwu replied coldly. "They murdered our children. But surely you don't intend to apply such extreme measures into other disputes? That depends entirely on how other species choose to conduct themselves. We have no interest in conquest or domination. But we will not tolerate attacks on human civilians, especially children." The message was clear, and it spread throughout the galaxy quickly. Humanity was not interested in empire building, but they would respond to any threat to their civilians with overwhelming force. Captain, Bora commanded the occupation forces on Keltar, the former Vectari shipyard world. Her engineers were busy with a project that amazed everyone who saw it. "Captain," reported Engineer Sanghoon, "the new facilities are nearly complete. We'll be able to produce 30 civilian transport ships per month." "Civilian ships?" "Yes, ma'am. Medical vessels, cargo haulers, passenger transports. Everything the Vectari civilian population needs for normal commerce, but nothing that could be converted to military use." It was typical of the human occupation strategy. Instead of simply destroying Vectari industrial capacity, they were converting it to peaceful purposes. The former military shipyards would now produce vessels for trade, exploration, and civilian needs. What about the former military workers? Most have requested retraining programs. They want to learn how to build peaceful ships instead of warships. The transformation was happening across all former Vectari territories. Military factories became civilian manufacturing centers. Weapons research facilities were converted to medical research labs. Military academies became technical schools. But while the occupation proceeded smoothly, evidence was emerging that made human commanders increasingly angry. Intelligence Officer Tai-Hoon presented his findings to General Tai-Yang. "Sir, we've completed our investigation into the New Eden attack. It's worse than we thought." "How much worse?" "The attack wasn't a tactical decision made in the heat of battle. It was planned months in advance. Korath specifically ordered his intelligence services to identify human facilities with high concentrations of children." Tai-Yang's face darkened. "You're saying they deliberately hunted for targets full of children?" "Yes, sir. We've found communications where Korath discusses the psychological impact of targeting human young. He believed it would break human will to fight. Instead, it guaranteed we would fight until they were completely eliminated." "There's more, sir. We've identified other species that provided intelligence or logistical support for the attack." General Tai-Yang studied the list of species names. Some were longtime rivals of humanity. Others had seemed neutral. All had contributed in some way to the massacre of children. "Prepare arrest warrants for the leadership of these species. If they helped murder our children, they'll face the same justice as the Vectari." The expansion of human military operations caught the galaxy by surprise. Within days of Tai-Hoon's report, human fleets appeared in the territories of 6 different species. "This is Fleet Admiral Seokjin," came the broadcast to the Krellian government. "We have evidence that your intelligence services provided targeting data for the New Eden massacre. Surrender those responsible immediately or face military action." The Krellians had been confident in their defenses. Their space force was smaller than the former Vectari fleet, but they had excellent fortifications and defensive positions. It didn't matter. The nanites dissolved their ships just as efficiently as they had dissolved Vectari vessels. The psychological weapons worked on Krellian minds as well as Vectari ones. Within 48 hours, the Krellian military surrendered without firing a shot. Similar scenes played out across 6 systems. Species that had thought themselves safe behind strong defenses found that conventional military thinking was obsolete. Humanity had changed the rules of warfare completely. Dr. Minsu, a human ethicist, broadcast a message across human space questioning the expanding war. "Are we becoming the very monsters we fought against?" he asked. How many species will we destroy in the name of justice? The response came not from government officials, but from the military personnel conducting the operations. Sergeant Dahier, a Marine who had helped recover bodies from New Eden, responded directly to Dr. Minsu's broadcast. Doctor, I've held the remains of children in my hands. I've seen what happens when someone decides human young are acceptable targets. Every species we're fighting helped make that decision. There is no too far when it comes to protecting our children. Her words were echoed by thousands of other military personnel. The expansion of operations wasn't being driven by government policy. It was being demanded by the troops themselves. President Minnie found herself in the unusual position of restraining military action rather than authorizing it. General, she told Taeyang during a secure video conference, the military is getting ahead of political objectives. We need to be careful not to create more enemies than we can manage. Madam President, every species we're targeting actively participated in the murder of our children. They made themselves our enemies. I understand that. But we need to think about long-term consequences. If we fight the entire galaxy, we might win, but at what cost? It was a valid concern. Human forces were overwhelmingly successful, but they were also becoming spread thin across multiple theaters of operation. War leader Korath received an unexpected visitor in his detention cell. Colonel Sung-hyun, one of his captors, sat down across from him. I've come to ask you a question, the human officer said. I will not provide military intelligence. This isn't about intelligence. I want to know why you targeted children specifically. Korath was quiet for a long moment. You would not understand. Try me. In Vectari military doctrine, you attack what the enemy values most. Humans value their offspring above everything else. By targeting your young, we believed you would surrender quickly to prevent further losses. Instead, you guaranteed that we would fight until you were completely destroyed. Yes, we miscalculated badly. Colonel Sung-hyun leaned forward. Do you understand what you've unleashed? Humanity is now removing from existence any species that threatens our civilians. Your attack didn't just doom the Vectari, it doomed every species that helped you. I am beginning to realize that. Good. Because you're going to help us prevent it from getting worse. Korath looked puzzled. What do you mean? We're going to put you on trial. You're going to confess to your crimes publicly. You're going to explain to the galaxy exactly what happens when someone murders human children. Maybe that will prevent other species from making the same mistake. The War Crimes Tribunals began 3 months after the end of combat operations. Chief Justice Young-ho presided over proceedings that were broadcast throughout the galaxy. War leader Korath took the stand first. Do you admit to deliberately targeting civilian facilities? Justice Young-ho asked. I do. Do you admit to specifically ordering the bombing of facilities containing human children? I do. Why? Korath's answer shocked the galaxy. Because I believed humans were weak. I thought you would surrender rather than risk more children being killed. I was completely wrong. What is your assessment? 6 months after the war began, the galaxy looked very different. The Vectari Confederation was gone, replaced by a collection of peaceful worlds under human protection. 6 other species had seen their military forces dissolved after being found guilty of supporting the New Eden massacre. The balance of power had shifted completely. President Minnie stood before the Galactic Council for the first time since the war ended. The Great Chamber was silent as she approached the podium. Every species representative waited to hear humanity's vision for the future. Fellow beings, she began. 6 months ago, the Vectari Confederation murdered 347 human children. They believed this would make us weak. They were wrong. She paused, looking around the chamber. Today I announce humanity's new doctrine for galactic civilization. We call it the Children's Protection Protocol. Any species that deliberately targets civilian populations, especially children, will face absolute military response. This is not negotiable. This is not subject to debate. This is the new reality. The silence continued as her words sank in. However, she continued, humanity has no interest in conquest or empire. Species that live in peace, that resolve disputes through negotiation, that protect the innocent, these species have nothing to fear from us. We will be their strongest allies. Ambassador Yuan presented the formal documentation to the Council. The Children's Protection Protocol was simple and direct. Any attack on civilians would trigger immediate human intervention. Any species that harbored those responsible for such attacks would face the same consequences. This isn't law, protested the hegemony representative. The Council hasn't voted on this. You're right, President Mini replied. This isn't law. Laws can be changed, ignored, or circumvented. This is a simple statement of fact. Attack our children and we will eliminate your capacity to ever do so again. The protocol was distributed throughout the galaxy within hours. Most species accepted it immediately. A few grumbled about human arrogance. None were prepared to test human resolve. On the former Vectari homeworld, something remarkable was happening. Captain Bora oversaw the construction of a new facility, where the old military academy had stood. Ma'am, reported Engineer Sanghoon, the new orphanage is nearly complete. We'll be able to house 500 children. 500 Vectari children? Actually, ma'am, it's for children from across the galaxy. Human orphans, Vectari orphans, Krellian orphans. Any child who needs a home. The facility was Sister Minji's, Sister Yunji's idea. She had requested permission to establish an interspecies orphanage on the world where the war had ended. Sister Minji always said love had no species, Yunji explained to Captain Bora. She would want her memory honored, by protecting all children, not just human ones. The symbolism was powerful. Where once Vectari military officers had learned to wage war, children from across the galaxy would now learn to live in peace. War leader Korath watched the construction from his prison cell window. Each day, he was required to view recordings of the New Eden massacre. Each day he saw the faces of the children who had died because of his orders. Do you regret your actions? Asked Dr. Minsu during one of his psychological evaluations. Yes, Korath replied, but not for the reasons you might think. Explain. I regret that I was stupid enough to wake sleeping giants. The humans were content to expand slowly, peacefully. They weren't threatening anyone. But I gave them a reason to show the galaxy what they're truly capable of. You regret the consequences, not the act itself? Korath was quiet for a long moment. No, I regret the act too. Those children, they weren't soldiers. They weren't a threat. They were just young beings trying to grow up. I destroyed that for no good reason. It was the closest thing to genuine remorse that Korath had ever expressed. The daily confrontation with the faces of his victims was slowly changing him. Fleet Admiral Seokjin commanded the human forces now stationed throughout the galaxy. Unlike traditional occupation forces, his ships weren't there to control territory. They were there to monitor and prevent future attacks on civilians. Admiral, reported Captain Mini from the Altair sector, we've detected a buildup of military forces in the Zephyrian system. Their fleet has increased by 30% in the past month. Any indication they're planning attacks on civilian targets? No, sir. Intelligence suggests they're concerned about pirate raids in their territory. Then we take no action. Our mission is to protect civilians, not prevent species from defending themselves. It was an important distinction. Humanity wasn't trying to prevent other species from having militaries. They were preventing attacks on non-combatants. General Tai Yang, now in his final months of service before retirement, reviewed the strategic situation. Assessment? Asked Admiral Junho during their weekly briefing. We've achieved our primary objective, the old general replied. No species in the galaxy will risk attacking human civilians. More importantly, attacks on civilians in general have dropped by 90%. Because everyone's afraid of triggering human intervention. Exactly. Species that might have targeted enemy civilians now think twice. They know that if we classify their action as an atrocity, they'll face the same fate as the Vectari. The unintended consequence of human military action was a general reduction in civilian casualties throughout the galaxy. Species were being more careful about their military operations, knowing that humanity was watching. On New Eden, something beautiful was taking shape. The crater where St. Helena Orphanage had stood was now a memorial garden. Dr. Jiwan, who had returned to her medical practice, tended the memorial daily. "The flowers are growing well," observed Sergeant Dongyun, who had requested assignment to the memorial guard. 347 different varieties, Dr. Jiwan replied, one for each child. They're planted so that something is always blooming all year round. And the new orphanage? Opening next month. We'll have space for 200 children and the finest educational facilities in human space. The new St. Helena Orphanage was being built with donations from across the galaxy. Species that had initially feared human expansion were now contributing to human humanitarian efforts, hoping to demonstrate their peaceful intentions. Ambassador Chanwu found himself in an unusual position. Instead of negotiating with hostile species, he was managing requests for human protection. "Ambassador," the Tentari representative pleaded, "raiders have been attacking our outer colonies. Our defense forces can't cover such a large territory." "Have the raiders attacked civilian targets?" "Yes. 3 farming communities have been destroyed. Children were among the casualties. Then human forces will intervene. We'll have a patrol squadron in your territory within 48 hours. Was happening throughout the galaxy. Species that had never been allies of humanity were requesting human protection. The price was simple. Commit to protecting civilians and humanity would protect you from those who didn't. The psychological effects of the war were still being felt in human space. Colonel Sung Hyun reported to General Taiyang about the mental health of their forces. "Sir, we're seeing 2 distinct responses among our personnel. Some are struggling with guilt over not preventing the New Eden attack. Others are becoming overly aggressive, wanting to expand operations against more species." "Treatment programs?" "We've established counseling centers on all major bases. We're also rotating personnel back to civilian communities regularly. It helps them remember what they're protecting." "Good. The last thing we need is our own forces becoming as brutal as our enemies." It was a constant concern among human leadership. The power to destroy entire military forces without massive casualties was intoxicating. They had to be careful, not to abuse it. Dr. Subin, the scientist who had developed many of humanity's new weapons, made an announcement that shocked the military establishment. "I'm shutting down all weapons research programs," she told a gathering of military leaders. "We have everything we need to protect our civilians. Developing more destructive capabilities would be excessive." "Doctor," protested Admiral Junho, "what if we face new threats?" "Admiral, we can dissolve enemy ships at the molecular level. We can make enemy soldiers physically unable to fight. We can isolate entire star systems from galactic civilization. What more do we need?" Her decision was controversial, but ultimately supported by civilian leadership. Humanity had achieved overwhelming military superiority. Further weapons development might tempt them toward aggression rather than protection. War leader Korath received an unexpected visitor. Yunji, Sister Minji's sister, came to his prison cell. "Why are you here?" he asked, genuinely puzzled. "My sister believed in forgiveness," Yunji replied. "She would have wanted me to try to understand why you did what you did. I have no excuse. I murdered children because I thought it would be effective. But do you understand now why it was wrong?" Korath looked out the window at the construction of the new orphanage. "Every day I watch recordings of the children I killed. I see their faces, their names, their dreams. They weren't strategic targets. They were individuals with hopes and fears and families who loved them. And I destroyed all of that because I was too arrogant to consider any solution except violence." Yunji nodded slowly. "My sister would say that understanding is the first step toward redemption.